Movies filmed in the great state of Utah on this episode of the Movies Past and Present podcast. Hello and welcome to the Movies Past and Present podcast. It's January 20th, 2024, and this is episode 119. I'm your host, Stanford Clark, and I'm podcasting from the crossroads of the West in beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah. Just on my website, moviespastandpresent.com, I'll be providing recommendations, commentary, and reviews about current and classic cinema. Thanks for tuning in, and let's do this thing. I'm joined on the podcast again today with my good friend, Chris Dallin. Chris had this great idea a few weeks ago when I was hanging out with him and with his family about talking about films that are made in Utah, and some serendipitous stuff has happened. And so here's my conversation with Chris Dallin. Well, I have the pleasure of talking with my good buddy, Chris Dallin. Hey, Chris.
Good day. I hope you're doing well, Stan.
Yeah, all is well. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Looking forward to talking movies today.
Well, me too. And thanks so much for taking the time and bringing your wonderful perspective and expertise to our discussion. Chris, you and I was with your family. We were doing something fun a few weeks ago, and you just had this great idea about podcasting about films made in our great state of Utah, and I just loved it. And we just have been kind of corresponding about this for a few weeks, and so I'm so glad we're finally having our first, what I'm calling our Made in Utah series.
That's awesome, and looking forward to it because there is so much beauty in Utah. There's so much talent. Looking forward to chatting about some of the great movies that have been filmed here in the great state of Utah.
Well, again, thank you for this wonderful idea. I just give you, 100% of the credit for this, Chris. And we're planning multiple episodes coming in 2024, and possibly beyond about just, our great state that we live in, and not only the bustling film industry, but really interesting history. One thing that we also ran into when while we were up in Ogden, if I'm not mistaken, and we came across this thing that was talking about that 2024 is the Utah Film Commission is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the premiere of the first movies that were filmed in Utah. So movies that were filmed by Hollywood studios probably in 1923 started getting released in 1924 into theaters, and so the Utah Film Commission is celebrating that anniversary, and I think celebrating not only film but also television, since both a lot of films and TV shows have been filmed in the state. I love this so on the Utah Film Commission has this website. It's film.utah.gov/100 years. I'll put a link to it out in the podcast notes on my website. But the Film Commission states that many cities and counties across the state share a part of the early filmmaking history here. And during this anniversary year, the Film Commission will celebrate all of the people, locations, and productions that have made Utah America's film set. Isn't that? I love that. That's their tagline. That it's Utah America's film set. What do you think about that?
Oh, I love that too. And let's call out something as well. I think that you had made the decision to do this podcast before we found out about the 100 years. So it was completely fortuitous that we're all on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. That was serendipity. So the Utah Film Commission has a lot of interesting stuff going on this year, including a historical exhibit that they've got right now in the Utah State Capitol building. So I'm stoked to go see that. I might be hitting you up, Chris. See if if you're in Salt Lake, we could meet up and go see that exhibit. I think it's on maybe the 4th floor of the Capitol building.
Yeah, it sounds great. And typically during the legislative session, they have these displays on cool things that are happening in Utah. One year it was the Great Salt Lake and the history there, but it'll be fun to see movies this year featured, in the great movies that have been filmed here.
So yeah, I'm excited about that. On this website that I again will have a link to in the podcast notes on my website. They've got a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's film screenings all across the state. I noticed that there's one coming up in February that's in Cedar City. A lot of movies were filmed down in that part of the wood, particularly a lot of westerns. Uh, and anyway, it just goes on and on. So it's going to be fun. One other thing that I discovered, Chris, and I just happened upon it because I was looking for another film, but Megaplex Theaters, which is a chain based here in Utah, uh, they are going to do a filmed in Utah film series, which includes 10 films. They're going to be screening one film a week starting on January 29th. And the very first film that they're going to show, Chris, is the great comedy Galaxy Quest from made in 1999, which I was pretty stoked. Uh, about that. But they've got a wide variety of films. We'll be talking more about this, I think, in our podcast. I also will be putting this on my Instagram feed too. But a full list is will be in the podcast notes on my website as well. And check out the Megaplex Theaters website too. I'll have a link there. So I might be hitting you up, Chris, to meet up at the movies to go
Oh,
see some of these films.
so excited about that. And you know what? I love that. When you can get classic films, those that you love, those that you remember, and see them once again on the big screen. It's a treat. And it really is.
Yeah, I think so too. And Megaplex does a really nice job with that. They usually get in just really beautiful digital prints of these films, and it's just such a quality experience, going to see movies at Megaplex theaters. So I'm I'm really looking forward to that. Some of the other titles to look forward to. Again, they run the gamut, but after Galaxy Quest, they're going to be showing Thelma and Louise. Uh, then they're going to be showing The Searchers, which we'll be talking about here a little bit more in a minute. Spoiler alert. Jeremiah Johnson. Anyway, I'm stoked. So good stuff from Megaplex, and how fun to be able to talk about movies made in Utah uh, during this memorable milestone. So, Chris, let's dive into some of we both have been kind of corresponding about some of our favorite films. There's so many, to pick from, made in Utah, and also though some cool experiences that we've encountered with film production in Utah. Um, Chris, what's been your experience, or what are your thoughts about generally, the film industry within our state?
It really, the beauty, the flora, and the fauna that exist here really does provide a great backdrop. But even deeper than that, Stan, is this we have so much talent here in Utah as well. So you add the backdrop and the beauty and the flora and the fauna and the talent, and it really is a great recipe for movie success. And that's why some of the greatest films, in history have been filmed in Utah. And I think that people sometimes don't think about, Utah as this mecca, but it is. And there's great movies out there that I think we're going to talk about in a bit. Um, Not only from a historical perspective, but again, those wonderful backdrops that really have become the foundation of what the Old West might have looked like, or what a planetary set might look like, because Utah really now is, the baseline for that kind of thought.
That's such a good point, and I think uh, it's really remarkable to think about how many films have been made. At least have used Utah as locations, and so much of that I think just as you said is the unparalleled beauty that's available here in the state and statewide. All sorts of different spots, just depending on what's going on with the story and the production. But also, you mentioned the really tremendous talent. I think there's a really deep talent pool, isn't there,
It
in
really
our
is.
state that filmmakers know about and you know take it. I don't use. take advantage of sounds negative, but I think that it's pretty cool.
Right. Well, and one thing I want to compliment the film commission, and I want to compliment the Utah State Legislature as well, because um, they've been pretty friendly to the movie industry as well. Because not only does it provide a window into how beautiful Utah is, but it does bring some economic benefit as well. You know. Also, I know that when I'm out and about and I'm on the road and I'm traveling, it's kind of cool to look up those places where a movie was filmed and go visit and say, this is where Austin Powers Goldmember was shot, or this is where,
Yeah,
um, The Searchers was shot, or this is where Dumb and Dumber was shot. And it kind of brings that validation that Utah has often looked for in the past. And that's one of the things that I wanted to mention, Stan, is it used to be that Utah was in such a hurry to try to be somewhere else. And that's just not the case anymore. I kind of liken it to Kentucky and New Orleans. And I know that that's weird, but go with me for a second. So Kentucky is not trying to be anywhere else other than what it is. They're baseball bats, bourbon, and horse racing.
yeah,
And that's just who they are, and they've adopted that. New Orleans the same way. You know, beignets and gumbo and jazz.
yeah.
They're not trying to, cook New York pizza in New Orleans, for example, right?
Right.
And which is indicative of what's happening. But Utah has had this identity crisis in the past, but no more. We've adopted and really embraced this idea of incredible adventure and outdoor experiences and and movies and music and Utah has come into its own. So we've stopped trying to be somewhere else. And ironically enough, other places are now trying to be more like Utah. And I love that. And that just doesn't happen. That's by a lot of work by a lot of people in the film commission, the legislature, the commissioners, mayors, and others coming together to promote the great state of Utah. And I'm really proud of all of those people who have made that happen, Stan.
Well said, Chris. I really appreciate that, and I'm with you. Uh, and one other thing, Chris, that comes to mind too is this is, I guess, is less about film making, but the Sundance Film Festival, which is really one of the premier film festivals in the U.S., if not in the world, is here, and it's going on right now, right? Uh, here interstate, it just barely started, and it's been going on for 40 years, which is hard to believe, but such an important part of, I think, the world's film culture, and here it just happens in our own backyard,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
which is pretty cool. Well, Chris, let's talk about just giving a bit of an overview in this episode about some of our either favorite films that have been filmed in Utah, and also maybe just some of like the cool experiences about that we've had with dealing with the film industry here in Utah. And let's start with you, my friend. What are some of your favorite films that were made in Utah?
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about this. And I think about these films. They've influenced me in my life. I think about them and chuckle too. But really, some great storytelling. So I'm just going to go through a list, Stan, of those that I like. And might I add to, and maybe this is too bold, but a little bit of a history lesson. Up until 1863, Preston, Idaho was part of Utah. So I'm going to kind of adopt Napoleon Dynamite
Yes.
because so
Yes.
so much talent from Utah and others. So Napoleon Dynamite gets an adoption clause. That's okay.
I support that.
Yeah. So just right over the border in Idaho, of
I
course.
love it.
But Napoleon Dynamite's great, of course. The milk tasting and the Happy Hands group, just
The whole thing.
Uh,
Tina the llama.
yeah,
I
Tina
mean
Fat Lard. Yeah. It's so fun. We were talking earlier, Stan, about how I love when I'm on the road to go to places where these films were shot.
Yeah, yeah.
It it makes the it makes the adventure even more so. Um, so we went to the house where Uncle Rico had parked his van, for example, and,
Outstanding.
and we took pictures and stuff, and it was kind of fun to see that. But what's really interesting about a movie, right, is it becomes part of the American vernacular,
Yeah, yeah.
and really allows you to kind of experience those things. But it's really cool that with films shot in Utah, they're so close, realizing that indeed Utah, the talent, the beauty, and so on is really part of the American lexicon as well. So um, I'll go on to the next one. One of my one of my movies that I watched with my father, and I still chuckle about the movie. And it wasn't intended to be a comedy for sure, more of an adventure. But it was the movie Jeremiah Johnson,
Yeah,
and
with Robert Redford.
Robert Redford movie. I loved it, but there's some quotes in there that just make me chuckle. For example, um, near the first of the movie, Robert Redford's character, of course, encounters a person that's dead that is holding a gun, and there's a note on the front of him that says, "I killed the bear that killed me," and explains, of course, the gun. And then things go on, and he meets is it, is it Hacksaw Jack? Is that right? That he meets, which is another mountain man, and he says, "Hey, Pilgrim, do you hunt grizz?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I hunt grizz." And he's like, "Now, are you sure that you hunt grizz?" And the next scene is you see Hacksaw Jack running down the mountain um, with a bear right behind him. He runs into the cabin where Robert Redford's character is. You hear bang, boom, smack, growl, and then Hacksaw jumps out the window and turns around and yells in the window and says, "Skin that one, Pilgrim, and I'll bring you another one." And that's one of the greatest movie scenes in my list ever. It was just so great.
I love it, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
excited to see that, as we mentioned, that's coming. That's one of the films in this Filmed in Utah series that Megaplex is doing, and I'm excited to see it on the big screen because I think I saw it on the big screen when I was a kid. But looking forward to it.
oh
It's
yeah,
been years,
yeah.
it's been many years, so I'm excited to revisit. love love it.
Really looking forward to that. Next on my list, of course, Dan, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh yeah,
I love this series. It was a great film, but the idea that it was filmed, down in the Moab area. Um,
yeah. I think in Arches National Park too, right? I mean, in addition to all areas are surrounding,
yep,
but
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
and we got the thing that I loved about it is the backstory of how Indiana Jones
yes,
got his hat and his whip, and
the spear of
really,
snakes.
it was almost like this mini prequel, right, of how Indiana Jones and some of his quirky things, as well as some of the clothing that he
Yeah,
stuff came to be, which was great. But it was a really beautiful set, to be sure. So I loved it, of course, and really fun to see.
yeah.
Uh,
I'm
and
with
it,
you.
and frankly, Stan, I mean, let's call it out here. I could spend a whole hour on each one of these movies, right?
Right, I know, exactly, and maybe we will in the future on some of these, but we can really do a deep dive. Uh, yeah.
Right, exactly. So, The Sandlot is
Oh
my
yeah,
next. I love The Sandlot, of course.
so much
Filmed
fun.
down in the Draper area, the Bountiful area, as well as Ogden. Ogden, of course, the Lauren Farr pool was there, and then Bountiful is where the house was, the Sandlot itself, and just such a great film capturing, um, you know, boyhood in America, where people would get together and play baseball and do some fun things together, and it's a lot of fun. But how can, speaking of the American lexicon and vernacular, there's things like "You're killing me, Smiles."
Yeah, which, like, everybody, yeah, quotes all
Yeah,
the
that came from that movie. But
Yeah,
also one of my favorite quotes, as you remember, the same the same character, Ham,
yeah.
that said, "You're killing me, Smiles." He was the catcher on this particular Sandlot, and he would try to get in people's heads, and talk trash like every sports does. But he had one of the best lines ever. He's sitting there. One of the characters is getting up, ready to hit the ball, and he says, "You know what? If my dog was as ugly as you, I'd shave his butt and tell him to walk backwards." No, it just kind of captures that inappropriate boy,
I
uh,
was gonna say, it's just our childhood. It's
right, trying to get in everybody's head. But I think that's the
right.
kind of thing, where chop busting and other things, it is kind of terms of endearment now, is because it's created that way. And
Yeah, yeah,
anyway, it's such a fun movie to capture, some of the essence of childhood for sure.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
Uh,
So much fun.
and then I have a couple more that I would love to mention. One that wouldn't be on anyone's favorite movie list, Stan, is Carnival of
Oh,
Souls.
Carnival of Souls.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
this one was released in 1962, and it was filmed, late 50s, early 60s. But the reason I like the film is not for the plot line or anything, but because it was filmed in downtown Salt Lake. So it's this great time capsule
Yeah.
of what downtown Salt Lake looked like in the late 50s, early 60s. Um, uh, Painful to watch, but if you watch it, with the idea of I want to see what Salt Lake looked like back then,
Yeah.
cool thing.
Oh, I think that is so great, Chris, 'cause that is really it's a really kind of one of a kind film, isn't it? As you said, not a great film, but an interesting one. Wasn't it also filmed out, like, on the kind of, the salt flats
Yeah,
am I
yeah.
getting it okay,
It,
yeah.
well, and what's interesting about it, as you know, there used to be a resort on the Great Salt Lake, and they captured that resort in this movie, so you can see it in its glory.
Salt Air, is that
Salt.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of a fun way to look back on the history of Utah by watching that film.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. And I've got this list of 100 plus films that I love in Utah, but I'm just going to mention one or two more here.
Please, yes.
Yeah, so I can't. I mean, really, in my opinion, one of the best comedies ever made, Dumb and Dumber.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. It filmed here in Utah.
Yeah, yeah, filmed at the Salt Lake Airport, Lakai, Ogden, Salt Lake, Park City, other places, of course, and just this film is so funny. I mean, this is Jim Carrey at his best, in my
Yeah, I
opinion. I
can
mean, just so funny, so funny. But some of the things, and one of the items that is in my family's vernacular anyway, is I want to go someplace warm, a place where the beer flows like wine, where beautiful women instinctively flock like the salmon to Capistrano. You know, one of the best lines in movie history. And then,
Yeah.
of course, just when I think you couldn't possibly get any dumber, you go and do something like this and completely redeem yourself. Just so funny. And
Yeah. I love that movie so much. I really I'm excited to rewatch it this year. It's been too long.
It's just so funny, and there's just those funny things, um, where there's a little bit of hope for intelligence,
Yeah.
um, and then you get something like, "Hey, what was her name? What was that beautiful girl's name? Swami, Slippy, Slappy, Simmons, Swanson? Oh no, Samsonite. I was way off." Just
Uh,
so funny, and
uh,
love that movie. But Stan, as we go throughout this, I was lucky enough to host a real life movie premiere,
yes.
in Utah, called Redemption. It's a film, a real film. Well, obviously a real film. A real story is what I meant to say. Uh,
Yeah, like based on a true story.
yeah,
True,
yeah,
yeah.
that's right. About a man who was a grave robber in Salt Lake City, and the law dealt with him in a unique way, put him out on Antelope Island, to live the rest of his life. And as a result of that, um, just a crazy story. So it's worth looking into. But called Redemption. One of the actors in the movie you would recognize, Larry Thomas. Larry played the soup Nazi in Seinfeld,
Yes.
and was able to interview him, of course, and really kind of a regional film, but really fun to be involved in that movie premiere as
Well, that
well.
was so cool, Chris. And uh there's a lot of there's a video made of this coverage on YouTube, and I'm gonna put a link to it in the podcast notes on my website too, because it's uh Chris, there you were, being a part of Utah film history.
There it
It
is.
was super
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was involved in some set location work for a movie called Clay Pigeons. Clay
Which
Pigeons.
I just recently watched.
Yeah, yeah. Starred Joaquin Phoenix. I was working at a swimming pool. I had no idea who he was, and he came to go swimming one night after shooting, I think. Nice guy, and then one of the set guys came in and said, "Hey, we'd like to shoot in this area." So that was shot up in the Honeyville, Deweyville area of Utah.
Mhm.
Kind of a murder mystery film,
Yeah.
and then I grew up right next to Brigham City, and I remember them shooting the film there. So not necessarily my favorite films, but so excited to kind of have rubbed shoulders with the producers and some of the actors and other things. Which goes to say that the people who work on these films, um, great people. They're good at their craft. I think that sometimes we elevate them because they're not accessible, but they are, and they're great people, and they do great work. Just like you and I have jobs, they do their jobs in really profound ways, and it's kind of fun to see that side of the film industry as well, Stan.
Absolutely, Chris. Now, Chris, do you have any other kind of brushes with fame of famous actors or actresses that you've seen here in Utah?
It,
Somewhere, in Utah?
yeah, I mean, not while they were filming along the way, but as you know, Costner is in Park City quite
Oh,
often.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I was riding my motorcycle in Jackson Hole and came up on a stoplight and looked over, and I said these words to myself. I said, "Holy crap, it's Han Solo." And Harrison Ford was riding his motorcycle, and
Oh,
and I'm like,
that's
"Hey,
outstanding.
can I ride with you?" And he said, "Sure." And we rode up the canyon a little bit. I ran out of gas, had to pull off. He kept going, but I can say that I rode my motorcycle with Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford's your ride or die. Although he didn't help you with the getting his orgasm.
But
I
but
love it.
what's really interesting is talking to these guys. they have jobs. The interesting thing is that they're easily recognizable, but their jobs are similar to ours. And I can't imagine being someone like Kevin Costner or Harrison Ford or others and trying to just have a nice, quiet dinner, for example.
Yeah.
And that's why I really respect what they do because um, some of these folks give up privacy, you know, um, to be able to tell good stories. And I admire them for that. And just whenever I see someone on the street, try to respect their privacy as much as I can. But I get starstruck once in a while, but mostly Stan. And I think you were with me on one occasion when I ran into a couple folks that help produce films for Disney. I get starstruck there with the creators, the producers, the writers, the people who make these things happen,
Yeah.
and really admire someone taking something that didn't exist and make it into this beautiful masterpiece. There's intelligence and brilliance there.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit about my run in. But to your point, Sundance is going on now. It's easy to run into these folks that are easily recognizable
Yeah.
because
Just
Utah is
walking down the street.
a place. That's right. Exactly.
Or introducing films, or I think that's one of the hallmarks of the film festival, as well as particularly Sundance, is that people are here. The filmmakers and actors, they're here, and
Exactly.
yeah. Um, Chris says, as per usual, I really don't have anything on you, but I have seen Donny Osmond twice. There's
Thing.
there's this Baskin Robbins, just a regular Baskin Robbins. It's in Provo, and I used to work in Provo, and literally, I mean, I went to this Baskin Robbins, I think, like a total of 3 times, but, my whole life, and 2 of the times Donny Osmond was there with his wife, which I thought was
What's the chances of that? Yeah.
yeah, exactly, but I appreciated it, just like what you were talking about, people left him alone,
Huh.
and I thought that was nice. That they weren't just hounding around him, because I mean, it's very obvious who he is. It's not like he was wearing a hat and sunglasses or anything. He just went in as himself.
But maybe purple socks.
I should have checked. that's that's so good. I love this list, Chris, of some of your favorite films. Some of mine, just to quickly add to it. I love westerns, and I'm hoping that we can, maybe do a bit of a deep dive on some favorite westerns. Um, I think my all-time favorite western is The Searchers, made in 1956, directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne. Natalie Wood's in it too. But I think one of the great film sets, again, just using that term from the Utah Film Commission, that Utah as America's film set, is Monument Valley,
Right.
and
It's beautiful.
it's so stunning and used with such great skill in so many of these Western films. Uh, so again, The Searchers is just one of many. Of course, it was filmed in that part of the world. The Searchers was also filmed along the San Juan River at Mexican Hat. Uh, so anyway, beautiful. Another one that I thought about, well, because recently, there's a new digitally made, Planet of the Apes movie coming out
Uh-huh.
this summer, called Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but it was reminded of the original, the OG Planet of the Apes from 1968 with Charlton Heston, and some of that was filmed in Lake Powell. As I was, just came to mind after seeing that trailer. Uh, what do you take on those Planet of the Apes movies, Chris? Do you
Well,
like any of those?
so Lake Powell is a great backdrop. I mean, there's
Yeah, stunning backdrop.
several movies. I remember Maverick, right off the top of my head, as well as a few others. But going back to the Searchers stand, let me be bold and say the skiing industry within the state. I think that many people credit Alf Ingen for the skiing industry in Utah. And and can I be so bold as to suggest that John Ford is really the Alf Ingen of movies in Utah?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point.
Got
Yeah.
got things started, and if you've been to Monument Valley, it's not by an airport, it's pretty far out
It
there,
is remote.
and it
Yeah.
is way out there, and that took a lot of guts back in those days, to shoot something on location that far away.
Yeah.
Anything, really, and which kinda said and I really admire John Ford for that, he found the right place and then made it work, not the other way around.
Yeah. That's excellent points, Chris. And what amazes me too, so many of these films, these westerns, they had just a huge amount of extras,
Exactly.
with these big battle scenes and stuff, and then all of the livestock, and you just go on and on. And think, this is an amazing feat. How do they do this?
Yep. I
Yeah. So I'm excited to explore that some more this year with this fun project. A couple other things, movies that come to mind, Chris. The movie Footloose from 1983. Again, the OG with Kevin Bacon. Uh, I think the majority, if not all of it, was filmed down in the Utah County area. So in Lehigh and Orem, Payson in particular. Uh, Lehigh Roller Mills, I think, is just still, and it's still standing, but that's just like one of the classic local locations of that movie. Uh, in fact, I was just down in Utah County just a few days ago, and yeah, I drove past Lehigh Roller Mills and just got a big smile on my face, like, oh yeah, there it is. It's still, still standing. It still looks, I think, the same as it did uh, in that film. I think Footloose, as I recall, too, was really quite a phenomenon, right? I mean, that was everybody, I think, really went crazy um, for that
Right,
film. Really launched Kevin Bacon
and it
too.
continues, right? I mean, there's just so much that have come out of that film. The play continues, there's been remakes,
Yeah,
and again, part of the American lexicon now,
yeah,
and then, of course, the soundtrack, how can we forget that?
yeah. Soundtrack. You've actually good point. Um, One final little movie comes to mind, and this. I mean, it was made for TV, but still, I guess technically a movie. But High School Musical, uh, because a High School Musical was filmed at my alma mater. I went to East. I attended East High School in Salt Lake City, where that film was made. They, if I'm not mistaken, in the movie, their mascot is the Wildcats, but the East High School mascot in real life is the leopard. And
Oh,
so they still, you could use like the same statue and stuff, or the same kind of iconography of the leopard, um, but for their Wildcats. Back, I don't know if it's still the case, but I think at kind of the High School Musical peak, uh, they my high school they were offering tours. Because people were just, I think all sorts of people were showing up. Speaking of, visiting site locations, uh, even though, if I'm not mistaken, too, Chris, in the movie they say that the high school is located in Albuquerque,
oh,
New
interesting.
Mexico, but yeah, it's Salt Lake City.
Well, yeah, and isn't that interesting? Like, Dumb and Dumber is purported to be Rhode Island, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, so yeah, it's movie magic,
Movie, that's right.
make Salt Lake look like Rhode Island.
Yeah, yeah. But so for a while, I can say that I attended the world's most famous high school.
I I think that's great. You know what? And that's the point that we were making earlier is there's so much beauty here. And I know that when people watch movies, they often say, boy, I would love to go to a beautiful place like that, or I would love to live in an area like that someday. And with all the Hallmark movies and the John Ford movies, and as a side note, like skiing Better Off Dead, for example,
Yes.
all not to mention the Grinch was filmed at Solitude, for example.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, at least the snow portions
The
were.
snow portion with the Jim Carrey Grinch, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, all of these things people are saying, "I would love to live there. I'd love to go there. I'd love to be in these beautiful places." And if you take just a moment and think, We are. Here we are. We're in Utah. We're in this beautiful place where all these movies are filmed, and it's just such a great place to be. And it's fun to watch movies that are filmed literally right down the street sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And again, I'm excited, Chris, to do a bit of more of a deep dive into some of these because just as you said, so many films, so many genres, there's just such a huge variety. I think often, people just think, oh, just only westerns were made in Utah, but I think we'll be able to show that that's not
Well,
that's not the case. I mean, of course, the westerns are great, and there were lots of them, but uh,
right.
lots of films. Yeah,
Exactly, Stan. I mean, just thinking through some of those, the horror movie scene, at the pinnacle of that, of course, is Halloween.
yeah.
Uh, Comedy, of course, is Dumb and Dumber and Fletch, for example.
Fletch,
Yeah.
yes.
What's interesting about that? If you go to Ogden, if you get off on the 24th Street exit, right off the 24th Street exit, there's an American Legion building. That's the building where from Dumb and Dumber, Dante's Inferno. Do you remember when the mob character ate the really spicy hamburger and died? That's that's where that happened. And then, ironically, 2 blocks down the road is the hotel where Fletch stayed in. Um, so comedies, horror movies, westerns, rom coms, and then this whole slew of Hallmark stuff. I mean, Utah has
Yeah,
really.
tons. I understand tons of Hallmark movies get filmed in Utah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife was in one recently. She played a waitress.
Oh, nice. In a
Yeah.
Hallmark movie?
Yeah. Of sorts, I believe. Yeah, she played a waitress. They shot it on Main Street in Bountiful. Yeah.
Chris, outstanding. We need to have a viewing party.
Yeah, exactly. She's not sure when it comes out, but she was excited that again she was part of the movie industry, right down the road from us.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, how fun. That's so great. Well, Chris, this has been an absolute blast as always. Thanks so much again for taking the time, sharing your expertise with us, and I'm really looking forward to some more discussions coming up about this topic, and again, more of a deep dive into some of these great films.
Exactly. Next time we'll talk Pirates of the Caribbean, World's Fastest Indian, as well as many others filmed right here in Utah, Stan.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Well, thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stan.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Movies Past and Present podcast. Again, a huge thanks to Chris Dallin for joining me today. More information about the movies discussed in today's podcast can be found in the podcast notes on my blog at moviespastandpresent.com. Subscribe to the podcast where you listen to your podcasts, and follow me on Instagram. I'm at moviespap, as in past and present. As always, I hope you will enjoy some good movies this week, whether they be from the past or the present. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, dedicate yourself to the truth.